Hello everybody and welcome to Electric City Sentai Denzicaster, your somewhat regularly scheduled podcast about the wonderful world of Tokusatsu. This is your host Mike Brown, and we're going to start things off before we delve into the archives again with an apology. This episode is going up a little later than usual. Typically our episodes go up either on Monday or Tuesday, but real life has intervened on us this week, as it is sometimes wont to do, so unfortunately this one goes up a little late. No worries though, because with our next episode of Denzicaster, we'll be back to our regularly scheduled, or somewhat regularly scheduled format. Also, the episode we're going to do today out of the archives, we take a look back at Godzilla 1984, is because the next time you hear from us, it will be Godzilla 2000 that we'll be looking at, and it will be the third Godzilla film we've talked about here on the podcast, and we kind of wanted to catch everyone up to date on all the Godzilla goodness, back to back to back, that we've covered so far. Since there's going to be a little more kaiju stuff showing up from time to time, we wanted to give a frame of reference. But the other thing that we want to put out there for everyone to know is that when next we see each other for Denzicaster, which will be Godzilla 2000, that will, in all likelihood, be the final audio episode of Denzicaster. We have already shot the first 3 episodes of Denzicaster in a new video format, so it will be transitioning over to a shorter show. It will go from the current format of running roughly an hour to being somewhere between a 20 and 40 minute, depending on the discussion, show. So it'll happen hopefully a little more often, but it will be a shorter show, will be a video format that we certainly hope you're going to enjoy checking out when we bring it to you. So definitely be on the lookout for that. And of course, as everything here on the ECS network evolves and changes and so on, we love to hear from you. So let us know what you like, what you don't like, what you'd like us to talk about. So give us all that good information, all that good feedback, and leave that in the comments below. As we say here on the YouTube, share, like, subscribe, all that cool stuff. And definitely let us know what you want to hear us do, because that is one thing that we thrive on here, is knowing what you guys want us to talk about and cover. So definitely, if there's a show, a particular movie or something like that in the Tokusatsu realm that we should look at or talk about, that you're wondering our opinions, or you're just asking yourself, hey, is it good? I don't know if I want to watch this or not, or waste my time looking at it, or so on. It could be god-awful. Well, ask us, because we'll watch it, we'll take a look at it, and even if it's garbage, at the very least, we'll get an entertaining half hour out of it. So, with that in mind, we take a look here at Godzilla 1984. Now, a lot of people have probably heard of this movie under several different names. To give you a little background, and I'm going to give very little background before we go into the actual archive itself and listen back here to the original discussion on this particular movie. It is the 1984 effort from Toho. Originally, it was simply titled Godzilla. And as such, it was sort of the return of the iconic monster, serving only with the 1954 original feature in continuity with it. Nothing else really counted. Over the years, it's gained the nickname The Return of Godzilla, and has also, gained the nickname Godzilla 84, was actually known as Godzilla 85 in the United States when it was released here by New World Pictures, heavily re-edited and bringing back Raymond Burr to give it some continuity to the 1950s original. So we're going to take a look back. Myself and the gang will be talking about the return of Godzilla as we delve into the Denzicaster archives coming up next, folks. Stick around. Hello wrestling fans, Greg Hunter here, one half of the best damn announced team period, along with John the Body Johnson, encouraging you to join us right here exclusively on the ECS network for the Announcers Booth. Between us we have over 30 years experience in the world of professional wrestling, and we use that to bring you the insights in the squared circle right here, past, present, and future on the ECS network. So join myself and John the Body Johnson for the Announcers Booth, only on the ECS network. are now taking our first steps into a new era of Godzilla here on the show with The Return of Godzilla. This is the 1984 entry into the Godzilla franchise. We've watched the 1954 Godzilla King of the Monsters / Gojira. We watched the American version here on the show with Raymond Burr and company. You may remember the Perry Mason theme from the end of that episode. And this time around, it is the return of Godzilla 30 years after the release of the original. It is the 16th Godzilla feature film. It marks the beginning of the Heisei era. It ignores all films that came before it except the original 1954 release. For this film, they wanted to make a return to Godzilla's roots, make him darker in theme and mood, make him a threat and an antagonist again. That didn't last long, but they tried for a film. In 1985, the movie was, by New World Pictures, released in the United States as Godzilla 1985. It was heavily re-edited, had new footage specifically for the North American release, and like Godzilla 54, Godzilla King of the Monsters, it was a direct sequel, or like its counterpart in Japan, rather, it was a direct sequel to the original film, with Raymond Burr reprising his role as, this time, Mr. Martin, because by this point there's a famous comedian named Steve Martin, and they didn't want to get him confused. But we didn't watch the American version, we watched the Japanese version, which I happen to have a subtitle copy of, so this was made in, let's see here, December of 1984, about 103 minutes, probably worth noting, doubled its money at the box office. It was made on a budget in 1984 of $6.25 million and made $11 million in the Japanese box office. So, pretty good little turnaround. Basic plot of the movie. It's 3 months after a volcanic eruption on Daikoku Island. A Japanese fishing boat gets caught in currents offshore where there should be no currents. When it drifts ashore, the island begins to erupt and a giant monster comes out of the volcano. A few days later, a reporter sailing in the area finds the ship intact but deserted, and when he explores the vessel, he finds the crew dead except for one young man who's been badly wounded. And suddenly, a giant sea louse attacks and is eventually killed. It takes a little bit of time. Back in Tokyo, looking at some pictures, our crew member, one Hiroshi Okamura, realizes that the monster he saw after looking at pictures was indeed Godzilla. News of Godzilla's return is kept secret to avoid panic until he attacks a second time, and this time destroys a Soviet submarine. Soviets think the attack is done by the Americans. There's a diplomatic crisis, which looks like it's going to escalate into full-on nuclear war. Japan intervenes and finally tells the world it wasn't the Americans and their nuclear weapons. The Soviets got eat up and attacked and destroyed by a giant radioactive dinosaur that we thought we killed 30 years ago. They revealed that it was indeed Godzilla. The Japanese arrange a meeting between the ambassadors of the two nations. There's some debate over the issue, and the Prime Minister decides that they will not use nuclear weapons on Godzilla, even if Godzilla were to attack the Japanese mainland. The self-defense forces put on alert and begin a search for Godzilla. He's eventually found on an island off the coast of Japan, feeding off of a nuclear power plant, but he reacts oddly to some birds. Sort of a signal to the birds, signal the birds receive makes them go off into an odd direction, and Godzilla seems to follow them. Professors decide to use the same method to lure Godzilla away from Tokyo. The Soviets have their own plans to counter the threat of Godzilla, and a Soviet control ship disguised as a freighter in Tokyo Harbor prepares to launch a nuclear missile from an orbiting satellite should Godzilla attack, regardless of whether or not the Japanese wish them to or not. Godzilla is later sighted at Tokyo Bay, headed towards the city, forcing a mass evacuation, and a state of emergency is declared. That evening, Godzilla appears abruptly in front of a patrol helicopter, and the self-defense force attack Godzilla with F-1 fighters. Their missiles are useless, and it shoots two of the jets down with its atomic blast. Godzilla goes to the coast. The army is waiting, equipped with tanks, rocket launchers, soldiers with assault rifles. They all open fire on Godzilla, and it works about as well as it does in any Godzilla movie. After a long blast of atomic breath, their army is subdued. At the same time, the Soviet ship hits the harbor and gets damaged, leaving the missile countdown on a timer that must be manually deactivated. The captain is the last member of the crew on the ship. When he attempts to stop the missile from launching, he is killed by an explosion due to an equipment malfunction. Godzilla climbs out of the docks. He heads towards Tokyo, wreaking havoc along the way. There are hyper laser cannon armed trucks that try to lure him away from Professor Yoshida's laboratory. And then the Super X, a piloted VTOL craft constructed in secret to defend Tokyo in case of emergency, specifically a nuclear attack, is launched. Since Godzilla's heart is similar to a nuclear reactor, they think that cadmium shells fired into his mouth will slow him down and seal off his heart. During the fight, the city is unfortunately faced with a much greater threat when the countdown ends and the Soviet missile is launched towards Tokyo. The Japanese government and people are helpless to stop it. After unleashing his atomic breath on the Super X, Godzilla falls unconscious, and the missile is predicted to hit Tokyo in 30 minutes. The Americans intervene and fire their own missile to counter the Soviet accidental launch. The professor and Okamura are extracted from Tokyo by helicopter and taken to Mount Miyahara on Oshima Island to set up the bird call device before the two missiles collide above Tokyo. The American countermissile hits the Russian projectile. Tokyo is saved, but the atmospheric nuclear blast creates an electrical storm and EMP which revives Godzilla and disables the Super X. Godzilla has a final battle with the craft, eventually damaging it and forcing it to make an emergency landing, where Godzilla destroys it by throwing a building on it. Godzilla continues his rampage until the professor sets up his invention and uses the bird call device to distract Godzilla. He leaves Tokyo, swims across the Japanese Sea to the volcanic mountain. He notices the signal device. As he walks towards it, Godzilla falls into the mouth of the volcano, which has been surrounded by detonators. The detonators trigger, creating a volcanic eruption that traps Godzilla for good, and thus ends the film. So, this is the first time I've sat down and watched the movie in its entirety all the way through. For what was a shock to me when I discovered it, this is the first time you, Ryan, have seen this version of the movie. Is that right?
Yeah, I've not seen the Japanese version. I've seen the American version with Raymond Burr.
Okay. So, and just let everybody know, folks who are in the room who watched the movie, joined by Ryan, Joe, Richie, and Dave, and Roger is here as well. He literally just showed up. And have you ever seen this Godzilla movie?
Sounds familiar, but I'm not sure.
Okay. But first time you've seen this version, first time I've sat down and watched it all the way through, I've kind of watched it chopped up once. Any of you guys, the rest of you, seen this Godzilla movie before?
No, this is the first time.
First time?
That's actually the first time I've seen a Godzilla movie.
Oh, wow. Okay, because you weren't here for the 54 discussion. Yeah. Okay.
And I'm actually alongside Ryan in this. I've seen the American version.
So you've seen the 85 version?
Yes.
Okay. So, and is this...
this is the third one I've seen.
This is the third Godzilla movie. Are you counting the Matthew Broderick?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm.
So
good movie, not Godzilla.
So to be fair, this is to qualify this. This is the second Japanese Godzilla movie I've seen. Okay. So, first things first, because I know we'll probably spend a lot of time on the story. We did that a lot with the first movie, but kind of just going through some of the bits and pieces. The first thing that hits, of course, in any movie like this is the effects. This is 30 years removed from the 1954 feature. So there's a lot of advances, a lot of technological advances that we see in the movie. Great strides in effects.
Some work better than others.
True. To me, you could tell a night and day difference between this and the first one. They did some things I thought were very, very ambitious.
Yeah. Like filming in daytime.
Yeah. There were some, but I mean, you could tell they took some very ambitious decisions in this film. I've seen a number of the Showa movies, and the Showa era movies that succeed the original Godzilla film really don't take a lot of chances with the effects. They know what works, they go with what works, and
it's the cookie cutter version that you get. But in this one here, you and I both were talking about this. Set wise, model wise, they really did go out and beyond what you normally would find in previous films prior to this one.
A lot
That's
of the
a detail that a lot of folks who may not be watching this in the same sense that we are,
yeah,
they may notice at the time, but it's not something they tend to think about.
Yeah,
it's really worth praising them for the model work, because it's a level of detail that really deserves to be noticed gets overlooked.
It was my favorite part of the special effects, because I was going to say, to me, all the effects are feast or famine.
Mm-hmm.
Either they're great or they are terrible.
Yeah.
Well, the biggest thing to me in this one, a lot of Godzilla movies up to this point, and I've seen I've seen a handful of the Showa ones, and I've seen clips from a ton of them. But like for instance, nobody in the room except perhaps you two will get this. Godzilla versus Gigan as an example. Yeah, there's a really cool monster fight, and it all happens basically in a quarry.
Yep.
And Godzilla versus King Kong, it happens on an island, and a lot of these fights, they're in places where
artificial arena syndrome.
Yeah, there's no reason to build a miniature set because they're in nature, and so you'll have miniature trees and things like that, which don't require a wealth of detail to look good.
As it is in Godzilla vs. Megalon, where they're battling in the middle of a drained lake, or Godzilla vs. The Astro Monster, where they're battling Ghidra on a distant planet.
Yeah. Whereas this one, you actually see them. I've seen and it's all Ryan's fault. I've seen a number of monster movies at this point. My opinion, because the first movie did it, Gojira 1954 did it very, very well to give you a sense of perspective and scale. Mm-hmm. And the miniature sets probably were not as detailed, but you had the forgiving nature of 1950s movie technology working for you.
Plus, it was supposed to be nighttime.
Right.
Plus, they had a whole different ambience direction to begin with,
sure.
in how to present Godzilla.
Yeah, but in every film, and this is documented, in every film up until 2014, because we're looking at a CGI Godzilla with that one versus the previous. Besides the Matthew Broderick TriStar with that Godzilla's CGI.
But not a Godzilla.
Yeah.
Besides Gina.
Zilla. Yeah, whatever. Every model that you see that's put in there, including the one from 54 all the way through, is actually we're talking painstakingly recreated from the original places in Japan.
Oh yeah, they take photographic
it
literally
reference. Is referenced to the streets, the towns, the buildings, and in the 90s it became an issue with the people in Japan when they saw building the next movie. People would run out and give Toho money, like, we want our building in there, because it wasn't something that was
it wasn't intentional advertising, but a lot of companies tried to make it advertising.
Well, it wasn't advertising as much as it was, hell yeah, that's us this time. Yeah.
Cross between tourism and pride.
Thank you.
Yeah.
They loved it.
Which winds up being unintentional advertising.
Right. No, you're right.
So I would probably say with this film and the miniature work they do in it, it actually is an evolutionary jump from the first one to this one that you don't see again until probably the 90s Gamera trilogy.
Yeah.
Because that is usually heralded as the best of the best when it comes to miniature set work that's ever been done in a Daikaiju movie, which is hilarious when you think that the old Gamera movies were really just low-budget Godzilla ripoffs in a lot of ways. And then the 90s one gets heralded as, no, this probably is better than what Godzilla had at the time. So, I mean, it's a massive jump. I really enjoyed the sense of scale, because you get a sense of how big Godzilla is amidst a 1980s metropolis as opposed to a major 1950s city.
That's cool.
I really dug that. Richie, what do you think?
Well, like I said, this first one of these I've actually seen. The special effects I thought were pretty good, considering how, it's 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like the detail in the models too. It's like most of the shots were pretty good. Were really good.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you see this one shot of Godzilla coming down the street, basically.
Yeah.
Everybody running for it. It's like that was actually a really good shot. I mean, something we could do far easier today than they could
sure.
do then.
But you got, going back to what you were saying, you're getting your scale of the people who are running, and you're seeing just exactly how far, how tall, how wide, what you're looking at as far as destruction that Godzilla has when you're looking up from where we're supposed to be standing up to, a 150, 200 foot monster.
I thought some of the scale shots were a little wonky, but it could have been loss of observation. I'm not the most observant person,
okay.
So
well, I kind of disagree because you were all over that one shot because you were like that was a cool effect when you saw Godzilla on the set moving and you had the mirror image of his actual.
Oh no, that was pretty cool where he was mirrored in the side of the building.
Yes,
and so there's that miniature building with the miniature windows, and yet you get his reflection.
Well, I'm saying some of the scale shots, some of the shots where they you're almost like you're looking from the human scale,
like the guy,
and you're looking up,
like the guy that was in the restaurant that you and I were both kind of cracking up at, and you were like, really?
I think the most evident failings in that regard are more when they actually do green screening tricks for that scale.
Or
instead of sticking it
or rear projection shots. Yeah.
Instead of keeping it to the you are actually using the physical prop side of it.
Yeah, it seemed to mess with the scale.
Whenever they did, I agree with you, Joe. I think when they had to use the green screen and the rear projection is when the effect started to fall and falter a little bit. I found.
But you could also just look at the technology at the time. So, in order to vary it up to give it so it doesn't just tame itself out, stay relevant as an effect.
I know it's an opinion-based thing, but it might have been better to not have it. If you can't do it good, sometimes it's better to leave it out.
Maybe.
Well, I mean, they did shots at different points for different Godzilla movies where they might have a full-scale Godzilla foot.
Yeah, I thought
and you might have been able to do the full-scale foot with the man in front of it going, oh crap, and then you could almost whip pan so that you don't see the difference between, and then whip pan up to see Godzilla's head. They could have done a number of different visual tricks, but to me, and now do keep in mind, we're not watching this on a 1980s movie screen the way it was intended. We're watching it on an HD TV from a digital file. So it's a case of we're seeing this in much better clarity than it was ever intended to be seen.
And not in the environment it was.
But still,
I love the models.
Yeah.
They were all so great.
One of the best things, and unlike where they had to vary it up with the green screen and such, the best things I liked is there was only one Hollywood moment, aka gratuitous massive explosion moment. That was just the chain of cars going up.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That was the only one. All the building damage, the building falling, all that.
Where he doesn't even use his breath,
it was realistic
he just
for it.
spits on the chopper and the chopper goes down.
The only thing about the models that you can look at and just the only thing that snap takes you out of the suspension of the disbelief is there's no people.
Yeah.
It's like, oh god, he's about to step. Oh, it's a toy. And
that's where you get just the limitations.
Yeah, I accepted it.
Way.
You know what I mean? I accepted the limitations because it's 1984 and was just still. Instead of being amazed by the shot, I was amazed by the quality of the set.
But the funny thing is, even within the limitations of the technology, what they could do, they had the common sense to craft the story to a point. They've evacuated. Why would there be people?
Yeah.
This line of cars at that point wasn't moving anyway. Everyone's got out.
Yeah, everyone's got out of the cars and made
their way down to the subway.
Yeah, so I mean, they've given you a reason to have an abandoned city for these miniatures to be uninhabited.
They do, but they kind of shoot themselves in the foot a little bit.
Oh, in different places, but sure.
Different places because I understand the prefecture system and all that gives a little bit toward this, but if Godzilla's coming into Tokyo and you've had a Godzilla event before, why wouldn't you just evacuate everything at the start to begin with?
Because it's been 30 years and you think he's dead.
Well, the other aspect
is... Once they prove he's back...
Once we've seen he's back.
When he's coming into Tokyo Bay and they start the evacuations, why did they stage it and stop the stages? That makes no sense at all.
Because...
They're talking about nuclear weapons and all that. Just get them out of town.
1950s Tokyo is maybe 1 million people. And I'm guessing. I have no historical or mathematical proof. But 1980s Tokyo, you're looking at several million people. You're looking at a size difference that's great.
Anything that helps my argument, because if you're going to have to evacuate all those people in the long run, you need to keep the process going.
Right.
Yeah, but
you're going to have to evacuate Charleston. Okay, let's go backwards from our state. You're going to have to evacuate the upstate into somewhere else so that the lower state can evacuate into the upstate.
That's right.
You get what I'm saying?
And in the history of Godzilla films, that really hasn't become apparent until now. And you can start seeing that more and more when you get into Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, Godzilla versus Mothra, Godzilla versus Space Godzilla, when you try to evacuate, because they're evacuating one city to go to another. Well, here's a problem. We know he's there. Okay, he's going to go to Village A. Well, guess what? He bypassed Village A. He's over here on Village C. And guess what? We just evacuated everyone there. Now we've got a big major catastrophe. We're going to have to back all that out.
Yeah, I like how they play with that in later movies. It's just... This one was more of
I get it. I get what
knew
you're
where
saying.
it was coming. They had enough advance warning to start it. It felt...
I think that
might
have been the guy that was sitting behind the director, like, for further reference, let's just try this on for size in the future films. That may have been, because I think in every Godzilla film you see something that's a little bit different from the previous one, and it seems to be a little bit better.
Were they hoping that the scientists with the bird sound or whatever it was, the magnetic pull, were they hoping that was going to be ready and be able to distract him before he pulled into the bed?
I think so, but it just the storyline just didn't pan out because they were still having issues.
Okay.
Given what cut of dialogue they used, it really did feel like that they were just planning on the military option.
Well,
because
I know that the Prime Minister was like, we're not doing the nuclear thing. And so...
But that's because they had Super X.
Well, what I'm getting at is they had Plan A, we're going to distract him with this migratory manipulation. Plan B was nuclear, and he's like, oh, we ain't doing that. And so Plan C was, well, we'll fall back on the military thing to slow him down until Plan A is ready. That's how it felt. I don't know if that's what they did.
The flip side of this
you definitely had the competing arguments, which was a good factor of that political machination.
Especially when it was all done in English, Russian, and Japanese.
That's what I was going to say.
If you horrible English acting.
It was.
Yeah.
It was.
If you can see the flip side to 84, which is the 85, the American version. Okay, now here's the deal. You got Raymond Burr, who is like big time. He's Big Papa Smurf, man. I'm telling you right now. He's got the full beard. He got the kimono on. And here comes this rinky-dinky little jerk-off from the military. We need you to come because you're the only survivor of the guy, you're the 94 or the 45 or what, a bunch of nonsense. Because that's how he basically portrayed himself. And then when Raymond Burr was there, he was like, shut up. I don't want to hear you. I know what you're dealing with. You're not going to be able to stop it. Because he keeps, that's the primary thing throughout the entire American version. He's trying to tell the military, quit your nonsense. You ain't going to do nothing to this thing.
Nothing stops.
Nothing's going to happen. Right. This thing, it's here.
It's like trying to stop a hurricane.
It's here. It's going to wipe you off the face of the earth, and you're just going to allow it to happen because you got nothing to stop it. And oh, by the way, would you please take the ADD patient that you have there and do something else with him? Because he was like the same way with everyone else. Let's nuke him. Let's just fire everything at him. And Raymond Burr's character would be sitting there in a corner, kind of like propped up, talking to the general, like,
we saw Godzilla.
Shoot him.
We saw Godzilla crack open a nuclear power plant, grab a cold one,
and got high off of it.
Vape that sumbitch 20 years before vapors were ever used. And,
I mean...
He was just 2 steps away from stepping up and giving you a hell yeah when he got done with that.
That's right.
And he was all like, oh man, birds, let's see where they're going, dog. Moseyed on back out to the ocean.
I gotta say one thing because I want to jump back to the political part of this for a second. The first movie had a very, very, very strong undertone of nuclear war, nuclear violence, and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. This movie doesn't hit it as hard, obviously, but we're no longer 9 years removed. We're 39 years removed.
Well,
but
counterpoint.
Well, I think they went.
Go ahead.
No, you first.
Counterpoint. They were hit deep in Cold War, Cold War, Cold War.
Absolutely.
But that's what the hammer they hit.
Yeah.
But here's where
Russia.
But here's where I'm going with it. I still think they did a very good job of keeping parts of that original story there and parts of it alive, because here's the Japanese Prime Minister who sits there and goes, "No, we're not using nuclear weapons," because the Russians are all about let's nuke the son of a bitch.
Mm-hmm.
The Americans are all like let's nuke the son of a bitch. And then you've got the prime minister who's sitting there and looks at one of his advisors, goes, "Well, what are we looking at? It's about half of what leveled Hiroshima." And he puts it in terms of, no, it's about half of what did this to us.
Right.
And here's the prime minister goes, "Y'all ain't never had nobody drop a nuke on your house. We have. Screw that. Not an option."
Yeah.
And so I actually liked seeing that as, playing it up. Not only does it make sense in the story because they've shown that Godzilla's going to feed off of it. If you drop a nuke on him, it ain't going to work. It's stupid. He feeds on nuclear energy. We see it twice in the movie. But
the most
It's
you
a
can hope
plant
for,
monster. Let's hose it down with water. Yeah, that won't stop it.
yeah, hey, there's freaking Poison Ivy. Do you think she'll stop if we douse her with Miracle Grow? Probably not.
At most, she'll go to sleep for a while because, oh, hey,
I brought you
I'm
roses.
stuffed for a bit. Okay. Oh, hey, now I took a nap. I'm ready to do more.
I like the. I can't speak for the Russian actors. I assume they were really Russian, but the American actors really seemed to be American people, and I thought that was pretty cool. They did not sound like people whose first language was something else besides English.
No, but they also didn't sound like they'd had any acting lessons.
Well, now I will agree with that. Their acting, it felt a little bland.
Forced.
Yeah. Honestly, it felt like he was reading off a cue card behind the camera.
I think there's I think you can actually count on one hand how many times an actual American actor or actress has been in a quote-unquote Toho Godzilla film.
Something I'm kind of glad about is they had every opportunity, mostly because of the let's nuke the son of a bitch lines, to make both Russians and Americans be completely and utterly stupid. Something that
I didn't feel
Japan
that they were
can do.
stupid, but I
As
didn't
I
feel
said,
that they
they
were
had the
aggressive.
They had the opportunity to.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And they gave them both sides an actual out. Now, granted, one was the stupidly aggressive side, which is what you're kind of getting at, of Russia going, well, if Godzilla decides to romp through Tokyo, we're still going to launch a nuke at it. They didn't listen, but they still had a backup plan.
The
Americans had the missile to shoot the Russian nuke down.
You had Japan. They had the ability in this movie. They had it fully within their disposal to vilify both sides of the Cold War.
And they did.
Yeah,
and they
'cause
chose
you
to
could just
vilify
the whole Cold War that way.
and they chose to vilify neither.
Yeah.
That's why.
But
it
again,
was a
the
nice
85 flip American version?
Oh, the Russians get vilified.
Yeah, they get vilified.
I thought that was funny when you were sitting there talking about some
That
of
was
it
one
in
of
the
the
beginning.
nicest changes. to be
And I
fair.
thought, hey, the Americans and their Russians agreed with a course of action in 1984. That was probably an unheard plot device to begin with in 1984.
Wouldn't that be a kickback to Ronald Reagan and Gorbachev having a conversation
in
back and
84?
forth?
I'm 7, so I can't say for certain, but I think it might have been a little early. I think that stuff happened near the end of Reagan's second term. So, like 86, 87.
Okay.
Well, some of the summits and such happened earlier in his career, but no, it's
When did his whole tear down the wall?
That would be in his second term.
that was in the second term.
So I think after that speech is when you can really start saying that the Cold War started unwinding.
But no, we're in the midst of it in this movie, and I really like that point because they could have vilified everybody, and simply chose not
frankly,
to.
given the political atmosphere of the time,
Would have been justified to do so, probably. Yeah.
and not just being one of the more common shticks in a more anime these days. Americans, dumb, stupid, and aggressive.
In American cinema in the 80s, and Russia's always a bad guy.
Well, I mean, Japan and Russia do have. There is a Russian Sino War. They have history.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I like the way the Russians were portrayed. They were a little bit more. I don't think they were any more aggressive than the Americans. It's just that
They
their
already had
procedure.
something get blown up.
Well, their procedures were different.
That's it.
We've got this missile ready to fire, and the only way to stop it is if we intercede. And we can, as Americans and being used to American cinema, we can pretend that the Americans is the reverse. We have missiles ready that we have to set to launch. See, they had a missile ready to knock down the Russian missile. That means they had a missile ready
to go.
Right! So, they were probably willing to shoot Godzilla as well.
I got one thing right quick and we'll go on. In this film and the 54 film.
Mm-hmm.
What do you feel is a moderate amount of destruction that is not? What I'm saying is, did you feel that destruction was adequate, inadequate, should have been more, should have been less? Versus the reason being versus the argument that was made last year of how much garbage that Superman did in the film Man of Steel and the Godzilla 2014.
Okay, well, we'll jump in here with a couple of differences. If you're looking at it from the standpoint of how much havoc did Godzilla wreak as opposed to Superman and Zod, the major difference being you're looking at an animalistic force of nature versus two intelligent creatures, one of whom is presumably the hero. So that it's not necessarily a fair comparison. Better comparison is amongst the Godzilla movies. I think for what you needed to get across in this movie, that Godzilla is a force of nature. He will wreck shit. You can't really stop him through any conventional means. They did what they needed to do to get that message across.
And he doesn't really go out of his way, like, oh, this building is in my way. No, he just moves around it. And yeah, of course, the same scene that had the reflection bit that you liked as a set piece was also just him moving around the building. And yeah, this claw drags out a nice chunk, but he doesn't really care. He just moves around the thing.
Taking what you're saying, I fielded the answer in my head a little different, and I thought the first movie he was more destructive than the second movie in comparison to what Tokyo was. When he hit Tokyo, when he hit Tokyo in 50s, when the damage he did was more severe because of the size of the city.
Yeah, because it's leveled it basically.
Right.
Everywhere you went, it was leveled.
Right. But it wasn't that big. It wasn't, it was easy to. It would be like you and me walking through a sandbox as opposed to you and me trying to trash every sandcastle on the beach. You know what I'm saying?
Enough, yeah.
The second one, he didn't do as much damage, but I think he was a lot more... It was more personal. And it might have been the way that they presented his facial expressions and the suit, but it seemed more personal. In the first one, he was all like, oh, y'all done woke me up. Fuck this. Stomp, stomp, stomp. This one, he was all like, angry about it. And now when the spaceship thing made him mad and he shot a hole through a building, you know what I mean? He was going for a target.
Hey, they followed suit and shot right back through that.
Yeah.
The hell matters.
But comparing it to the Superman thing, the Superman destruction realistically is 5 times more than both of them combined of Godzilla. To me,
the reason I bring that question up because it kind of ticks me off a little bit because I know we're trying to compare apples and oranges and now we've got pineapples in the bunch.
Well, the Superman plot is the machine's designed to destroy the city.
Yeah,
it's like we're gonna set this machine up here and another one on the other side and boom, boom.
If you look at DC, and I'm not trying to get off subject, but if you look at DC Comics for at least the past 15 years, their wanton destruction in the comics supersedes what we actually saw in the Man of Steel.
Oh, really?
If you look at Godzilla as a whole in the IDW Rulers of the Earth, I mean, there are whole structures, there are whole cities in the United States that are nothing more than dust.
Really?
Okay, so that's why I'm trying to figure out, because everyone was like, that's too much wanton destruction in a movie. I'm thinking to myself, if I'm watching Superman and Zod battle, that's exactly what I want to see. If I'm watching Godzilla come to shore to battle 2 gigantic monsters, you damn straight, that's exactly what I want to see.
I'll agree with the Godzilla part you're talking. I do not agree with the Superman part.
Because it kind of
you have an
undercuts his nature as
Superman
but it's the 50,
you never know who might be trapped in that building.
It's the 52 Superman, and at that point, Superman is not a happy camper with the American people. The American people aren't a happy camper to him. He really, in the 52 series in the beginning, doesn't really care.
Yeah, but the movie doesn't show any of that.
Yeah,
that unfortunately I agree with, and it should have.
So
I think you're going to get that in this upcoming thing.
Everyone who went into that Superman movie who wasn't a comic book fan was a fan of Superman as a character, probably, and they're used to him being truth, justice, and the American way, and hot apple pie, and
that's a story for another podcast.
Right. Yeah.
But Godzilla, you expect him to walk in town and wreck shit, whether he's all like, "Fuck your tank, fuck your tank, fuck your tank," or "I just turned left and my tail knocked down your noodle stand. Oops, my bad."
I didn't see or hear any of that nonsense when Pacific Rim came out.
See, I think there's a different standard involved. There's a standard between what you want out of a superhero movie and what you want out of what is essentially a giant monster movie.
Yeah, because with Pacific Rim, you got robots and monsters going at it, wrecking everything in left and right.
But they mostly fought in the bay.
Now, what I will say on this, watching this movie, though, I think the amount of destruction served the story. Yeah. That's all I care about. And it served the story well. You don't have as much wanton destruction as you got. Oh, God, Final Wars, they practically blow up the planet.
Oh, yeah.
But in that movie, you have Godzilla versus every giant monster that's ever lived. Mm-hmm. And in this movie, you have Godzilla versus, as Dave put it, UFO Maru from freaking Ninja. But it's him versus the Super X. So there is no...
Look at giant floating helmet to me.
There is no... This is the second consecutive Godzilla movie we've watched. There is no giant monster fight.
I know.
It's Godzilla shows up to wreck shit. He is the only monster in this movie. And so,
the question is, really, is he there to wreck shit, or is it just in his way where he was heading?
I'm thinking a little bit of both.
So we don't really know.
Given the nature of us stupid humans aggravating his ass, military, little column A, little column B.
I suspect there is a little bit of vengeance in mind. We are left to presume that this is the same Godzilla from 1954. This is the same one they dropped an Alka-Seltzer on and tried to dissolve.
It almost looks like, I don't know, watching, this is the second one I watched now, not counting the Matthew Broderick one. We'll leave that one alone for a moment. It's almost like Godzilla is the antibiotic for the Earth.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Like, and they've portrayed him as that before.
Have they? Mm-hmm. Okay. Because it's like, hey, this stuff's causing trouble. And he wakes up and goes, stop causing trouble. Flat, flat, flat. I'm going home.
What did we think of... Because this is something I noticed. I don't know if anyone else did. But I've never... I guess it comes from watching this movie and the 54 movie consecutively. What did we think of the callbacks to the 54 movie? Because I saw a bunch of them. I saw... There's the moment where he picks up the train. Now it's a bullet train as opposed to a standard train, but we have that moment where he picks up the train and looks at it, and it's almost the same style shot. Yeah. We have him walking through the electrical wires, just like in the first one.
They were so worthless in this one.
Yeah. we have the fuck your bridge moment again. So, there's a lot of callbacks to the first movie in this one, which when you do something like this, where it is the sequel to something long ago. This is a terrible example as far as the quality of film, but it makes the point. If you watched the original Christopher Reeve Superman movie, and then you watched Superman Returns, never watch them back to back. It's a terrible idea. You find out at that point that it's the exact same damn movie. Mm-hmm. But, that said, Superman Returns had callbacks to the original. That reminds you this is the same character in the same world.
Well, they got Jor-El for Pete's sake. I mean, they took Marlon Brando and did it.
Yep.
But
it's not just that.
No, I'm talking about
it's Brandon Routh.
He did the same things.
The way Brandon Routh.
No, I'm agreeing with you. I'm on board for that.
Yeah, he wasn't playing Superman. He was playing Chris Reeve playing Superman.
Yeah, I mean he was, which I think hampered the performance.
I don't know. I mean, I liked that one. I enjoyed that one big time, and it was partly the nostalgia love that movie did that increased its enjoyment to me.
The bottom line, I'm just feeling that thing like within that movie, Brandon Routh saves the plane. He walks on. What's the first words we hear Brandon Routh say as Superman? I hope this doesn't put any of you off flying. Statistically speaking, it's still the safest way to travel. It's the same first line Christopher Reeve says as Superman in Superman 1.
Well, doesn't
to Margot Kidder after he saves?
Yeah, that's true.
Doesn't Kevin Spacey kind of?
Kevin Spacey's version of Lex Luthor
is pretty awesome.
Overexceeds Gene Hackman.
I don't know. I felt it was kind of a continuation of that character as well.
He plays it as a much darker Luthor.
Well, I liked it,
but he's been in jail for a while.
But
5 years.
You know what I mean?
But to your point, yes, there are moments in his performance that are callbacks to Gene Hackman's. Yeah. You get that throughout the movie, though, in every moment. I got a lot of that out of watching this movie.
And it's not something that's just wide open either. I mean, it's kind of subtle.
I didn't really see it, but with you pointing it out, I kind of get where you're going with it.
Mm-hmm. You want to know what I think about it, since you're using the Superman reference as well? Given the number of callbacks, they didn't go big, flashy, this is a callback moment. Which I think, when you get Superman Returns, those callbacks were extremely obvious because they wanted you to pay attention to, this is a callback, here's a giant neon sign. Well, you didn't get that in the Godzilla. Because it was either subtle or during the moments that weren't subtle, like, oh hey, this is the train scene redone to the modern version. Unless it didn't need to be subtle because it was just he's on the rampage portion of this film Sure.
Unless you had just watched the 54 version or someone told you, you wouldn't have caught it.
Yeah.
And to me, or you've seen it numerous times.
I can't say I've seen them numerous times either.
It's a subtle
I got
callback.
what you mean by callbacks. It's just they're subtle.
It's a subtle callback, which I like. Superman Returns was kind of like, here's the callback. We want you to know it's a callback, but
Here's
at least
we're going to be headed with it.
But at least it's organic to what we're doing. It's not out of place. It's just
organic.
And then you hit Star Trek Into Darkness, where it's here's the same damn scene from Star Trek 2, word
just
for word,
reverse.
beat for beat, and flip the two guys. Here's that we're going to pound you with a fucking chair until you realize that we're doing the same script. But anywho,
I think the Superman thing.
I enjoyed that. So.
Did you?
I enjoyed it.
I thought it was lazy.
yeah, so did I.
I
But
really
anywho's,
I think the Superman one, they were. I'm going to be nice and say writing a love letter
sure.
to the first movie, and I think that was the intent in filming the scenes the way they did.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Godzilla one was like, Godzilla's going to wreck the place. What if we do a couple of shots that call back to the old day?
To give
and
homage.
they're like,
To give homage.
yeah. So there's a difference between
Sure.
I did 3 scenes, kissed the 2 fingers, put them up to the sky. I'm remembering you, brother. You know, homage to
As opposed to rip off.
to rip off. I'm going to copy and paste. And copy and paste by itself is not bad. It's all in how you present it.
Right.
Well, I think Mike put it well. There are a lot more callbacks that are so subtle than I think even you might realize. Because
I'm sure there are.
During the press scene, there was a similar callback of just subtle positioning and shot taking.
When they were all there
Different,
looking at the fact that when he first came, came to light.
And you have like all the different technology and whatnot, and so everything is just slightly different, but they're using the same angle. They're using the same pan over.
What about the sailor sister and the reporter? Was it just me, or were they kind of starting a little romance?
Oh yeah.
Well,
which goes back to the doctor and the girl,
Right,
and the
yeah.
other guy.
You do have the
That
love
was probably more
triangle
blatant.
type thing. So you have a lot of callbacks to the first movie that they don't hit you upside the head with. They're just subtle, like, let's remind everyone which Godzilla movie we're doing here.
I think Godzilla's an easier character to do that kind of callback because, unfortunately, Godzilla's kind of a two-stroke character. Godzilla wakes up, Godzilla knocks things down.
I think Godzilla goes.
Yeah.
His personality doesn't have to be well-rounded because he's a force of nature.
Yeah, but see, okay,
Dynamic,
now
but
you
not deep as a character.
You've got
Okay.
you got 3 films under your belt, and each one does not have a protagonist opponent. It's just been the military and the city.
And that's something we'll probably get to more when we actually start getting some of those.
Godzilla versus X.
Well, see,
Well,
you might be right.
I feel that
You know, if we watch 7 Godzilla versus something or else, he's going to probably develop a personality because it's going to be his personality versus the opponent.
Because you start to see those things, like in the '60s.
But Superman's a person, and he comes in with a personality.
Yeah, well, with Godzilla, I mean, I get that with Godzilla Raids Again, then you got Godzilla versus Kong. You see Godzilla as the enemy. Even Godzilla versus Mothra, he's the enemy. Then all of a sudden, it's like there's a shift in dynamic. Here comes Godzilla. Oh, well, look who's beside him. Well, now it's Mothra. Well, look over here. Hey, it's Jet Jagra. And now he's like the love of kids. And his personality changes. All right, you go through, and then you're in the 90s part now. Because we've already seen a little bit of the 80s. Now you're in the 90s part. Godzilla is totally different now.
The hero.
He's not the hero anymore. He's the anti-hero. He can care less. But he's bigger. He's meaner. He's pissed off more.
He did seem to be larger in this movie than he was.
Oh,
in
he's
the
larger
50s.
in the 90s, and then he gets larger in the
Oh,
2000, and then the biggest one is the one in 24.
it's like every time
2014.
every time somebody tries to destroy him and winds up putting him into some sort of state of stasis or sleep or whatnot,
Hibernate.
he just
He gets bigger. He's like the damn Hulk.
So, another thing that gets heralded a lot in these movies to me is the music and the soundtracks and such. For this movie, the Godzilla theme is the Godzilla theme, and it's it's one of the most iconic pieces of music ever.
Pretty much all the way throughout.
I didn't get the iconic feel of the music for this
Not for this
movie.
I didn't even feel like there was a soundtrack. But then music's
It-
not my cup of tea.
There was, but for me, it sounded more like ode to Hellraiser I mean, you.
Oh yeah, you said that when it started.
You literally
the
need
opener.
to listen to it again, and then bring up the original sound, the original orchestrated piece for the beginning of Hellraiser, and it's almost identical.
I like that they kept Godzilla's sound effect the same,
Well,
or
yeah.
as near as I could tell.
Yeah.
To give an idea, by the way, of the size difference, the original Godzilla from 1954 through 1975 is supposed to be 50 meters tall. The 84 to 95 Godzilla is twice that size.
Yeah.
So, a nice little size chart I found that goes to the size. They actually shrink him from the Heisei era to the Millennium series. They actually make him smaller.
That's only because he's stretched out more.
But-
Instead of it being higher, he's more crouched.
Right.
And that's the only reason why.
Poor Godzilla and his thunder thighs.
That's cracking me up.
Oh, what, did they put the
The
Hanna-Barbera cartoon
Hanna-Barbera,
with him?
yeah, he's in between.
Cartoon.
He's in between the little Sony Zilla and the the 80s to 90s version Godzilla.
Yeah.
It cracks me up.
So, and of course, the tallest one to date, though not by much, is the legendary version.
At 350, I think.
Yeah, he's just over 100 meters tall.
Unfortunately, when it comes to music, I'm actually with Dave here. I try to pay attention to music. I like when music accompanies things and helps underscore it. But after the opener,
Yeah, after the scene with the sea louse, the music made it. Plus, it was just a creepy scene to me, and I felt it.
I got ambience after that, but
Yeah.
I don't think I really got music underscore.
And maybe it was ambience, not music, but
Well, and to me, I cannot call it a bad soundtrack, because if it was a bad soundtrack, I'd have noticed it. My thought process is, if it's a good soundtrack, if it's simply a good soundtrack, it will complement the film. You will not realize it's there.
Well,
If it's a bad soundtrack, you know it because it's a bad soundtrack. You're like,
And
oh
it's
my
there.
god, and it's there.
Yeah,
That's
where we get into slightly different terminology.
If it is an excellent soundtrack, then you're going to notice certain moments in it. For instance, because there are certain songs you can pull out. For instance, Rocky had a tremendous soundtrack.
Oh, yeah.
And you watched it and you knew that soundtrack was there.
people don't even know the name of it. It's just Rocky's song.
Yeah. It's
I mean,
just
I don't know if that's its real title or not.
the theme from Rocky. The
Yeah.
actual name of the song is "Gonna Fly Now."
Yeah.
Okay, no, everybody calls it the theme from
But
Rocky.
it's the theme from Rocky. So in this, I can't say that it was a bad soundtrack because it didn't bounce me out. But it's not. The 54 movie gave you ambiance and a lot of sound and just
Their
very
sound
spooky.
design was step above.
This one,
far more.
not so much.
There was something about the 54 movie I wanted to bring up that I was kind of let down on this one. The severity. At the end of the 54 movie, and at the beginning of the 54 movie, you see the destruction.
Yeah.
The hurt people. Now, I know that the town got evacuated a bit in this one, but you don't get the ramifications. You don't
have the gravity.
Yeah, that's the word. I mean, yeah, there's a guy who dies, and in my opinion, he laid down and took a nap.
Yeah, that
And
death was so poorly
everyone in the room's like,
at least by today's
he's
standards.
dying from radiation, and I'm like, yeah, if you read the director's notes, you know that. Because everyone else who's around him isn't getting radiated.
Yeah.
The heroes got away.
The 1954 version, you walk through a camp with bodies everywhere.
Right, and burn
Oh.
victims. You wake up in the hospital and start the movie in the
In
hospital.
different
The
stages
only
of
hospital
mutation.
scenes we get in this are the recovery after the sea louse issue for the
Right,
for the
right.
sailor.
Yeah.
It's just kind of a wash like that because between gravity and not having the sound to maybe enhance what destruction and presumed death you do see, it loses a lot.
Well, again, the intent of the movie. Maybe they didn't make this movie to be a gravity-inducing moment. Maybe it was more of a spectacle. This is a destruction monster movie. We keep saying, go back, it's a monster movie. We made it to be a monster movie. The first one might have been, it's a monster movie, but we made it to be a political satire.
There's the undertone of a
Heavy-handed.
There's the undertone of a political story behind it.
I wouldn't call it heavy-handed.
But in this version,
I think it's exactly what they're looking for.
I think it is closer to being just a monster movie.
I think they really robbed themselves of something there. I mean, I think just as much as Godzilla is an act of nature, if you don't show the destruction of the nature
of what it does,
it's
like
irrelevant.
it did. I agree with you on that. I hadn't really thought much about that.
If the hurricane hits Florida and you don't see footage did the hurricane hit Florida?
Well, here's a question for you. Just given the movie as it stands right now, since we've just watched it,
Sure.
would it have been as simple as adding in one or maybe two different establishment scenes as he's leaving the city because migratory bird signal thing?
Right, and he goes to the volcano.
If you saw death or maybe just
rescue
bloodstains,
vehicles,
would that have been enough? Just in one or two scenes.
A minute worth of rescue vehicles running around, putting
about-
out fires.
What about the military
Crying,
that's there trying to pull people out of the rubble of a building
Well,
they didn't
they
get out
got
of?
melted. I mean,
Let me ask this, because you've seen pretty much every Godzilla movie.
Sure.
I've seen a healthy chunk. I can't think of a movie past the first one that shows the human level of destruction and the human toll in the movie the way the first one does.
It's a peekaboo hide and seek deal.
sometimes it happens, most times it don't.
That's right.
Okay.
Most times it's just outright
Wait,
lampshade
see,
or implied.
But you think
but not
about that.
shown.
You think about it. The scene was like looking from, OG 344 green jumpsuit army guy just standing there scratching his head underneath his helmet, looking at the destruction as Godzilla walks off into the bay. That right there could have 10-second scene could have told you.
Or played more with emotions and just have him look and just hit his knees, let the helmet drop.
Like the
and just
radiation
break
guy?
down. Well,
Your-
no, I don't
Or,
mean
yeah,
like that.
yeah,
Just
yeah.
holy crap.
Yeah.
Your major rescue stuff, like from the 90s up, is basically the main characters, the main actors and actresses who are actually getting rescued out of the rubble. I think there's like 2 films I can recall right now that does that. Majority of it is everyone's already been evacuated to the next town.
Right.
But that's because
So it's
you
a
actually
ghost
have-
town.
All right.
The reason they do that is because you actually have main characters who aren't Godzilla and
I know that, but
Raymond
what,
Burr.
but what he was referring to was like to actually see the people pull people like you get in Godzilla 2014. You get the rescue of what's going on.
Yeah, well, no.
Here in some of the other films from the 80s, but in the 90s and the millennia, there's not really that connect.
Yeah, because they only go for the personal attachment to the main character.
That's right.
Get
Well,
where I'm getting at there.
To be fair, in the Japanese, those medical scenes existed in the Japanese film.
Correct.
They had to make extra ones with Raymond Burr.
They basically shot of Raymond Burr
extra.
in
Right.
them, but yes.
So
they
my
shoot
point
inserts.
is, though, those medical scenes existed outside of the major characters.
Yeah.
But
And-
what you're getting there in 54, what you're seeing there with all those people there is basically just the Japanese way of saying, "Hey guys, look, when we had the bombs dropped on
Oh,
us,
yeah, this is what it looked
what
like."
it looked like with us."
Now, another possibility to play devil's advocate for a second, and then I want to throw something else out there as a possibility. Could it also be a budgetary concern? And here's what I mean by that. In the 1950s, you do not have the money to show a destroyed city. You can show a hospital full of victims wrapped up in bandages. But you can't show the whole city as wreckage and build that level of a miniature set.
Should we respond to that
Oh,
sentence?
well, let me come back to it.
yeah.
When you get to the 1980s, you can see that level of wanton destruction. So I'm wondering, is part of that? Now, I'm not talking about the story and the intent for the elicitation of the emotion in the 50s version. Obviously, there's a reason and a motivation for showing these people hurt like that. But could there be a budgetary concern? It's easier to wrap people up in ace bandages than it is to show a miniaturized.
Well, not
set.
only is it easier, but I think it's better. Because...
And cheaper.
No, well, I'm not worried about that part. I can be that guy in the hospital bed.
Right.
I can't be the destroyed town.
Right.
I can ensure that a certain emotion is in
Yeah, there's an empathy, there's a immersion. And the other thing is, not to be mean, Godzilla beat up some toys. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, it was a model. When he pushed the building down onto the thing, onto the robot or the flying ship, and I looked around, I'm like, that's so much bullshit. The building would have collapsed, it would have fell apart. It's not real.
Mm-hmm.
The people lying in a hospital bed are real. Even if they're just acting like they're hurt,
Yeah.
it's
sure.
I think
real.
in a lot of ways, a lot of other movies, it becomes the simplicity, and they have the money to throw at the problem. So they go with the budget concerns of, hey, in this we can destroy the city, so let's just do that.
I mean, I'll buy
I think
any-
in this case, because for these 2 Godzilla films, not counting the ones in between, because I'm sure you'll
Oh,
agree
there's
with
a
me
ton.
that they get quality roller coaster
Oh,
dose.
yeah.
But for these two films, I feel like bringing up that, even though it's just you're being devil's advocate, and
sure.
that's fine. I think that does a disservice to the folks who made this movie.
This one?
Yes. I think they had the budget, so yeah, they could do more city destruction.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason they didn't do it, they chose not to.
Now,
Because they had plenty of powerful scenes, whether it be with people, with establishment, with even just the physical props. They could have done it. They would have done it real well, given the rest of the movie. It wouldn't have been random and unforeseen. They just chose not to. It could have been cut footage that never... That, that literally burned in the cutting room floor that they never see.
Now, let me ask this. Because, to me, it worked not as effectively, but it worked. We never see the scene of the destruction, the human destruction that Godzilla leaves behind like we would in the 54 film. But we do have, here's Godzilla presumably defeated. We see humanity basically around him looking at this wonder of the world. Granted, it's kind of stupid to do so, but they are.
Hey,
and then when he
person
comes
is
back,
smart, people are stupid herd animals.
but when Godzilla revives, and even in some scenes before that, while we don't see the hurt, we do see here is a mass of humanity running for its life away from him.
But it's
so you see the human reaction of, oh shit, this is a legitimate threat.
Yeah, but I already know that Godzilla's scary.
So I
think it's also a question of scale.
I agree.
Yeah,
Because
well,
you see this small part of the scene, you see the small what technically the small crowd compared to the city full.
Sure.
And if there's any particular problem of all the physical effects is, at any given point you're seeing a very small part of the city at once.
Sure.
You'll get the destruction, you'll understand that this all builds up, but just like we don't see the human element of it, we never see like a drawn back after.
Yeah, that's really not until the Millennium series when they can supplement the practical with the CG.
Right.
And the other side of the coin is, again, it might not have been their intent to do that. And I get that.
But what if they did? What if, let's go back to that same scene where Godzilla slumped over into the building. You've got all the masses down there standing around like, you got the hot dogs waiting, you know?
Was that what they were doing? Or they were just in awe of like, oh my god, we stopped it.
It would be stupid to be there to start with.
Somebody would have been there. If that was today, someone would have had a selfie stick.
Well, sure.
But there was a line earlier in that, though, when they were talking about when he came last time, that I think applies to why the crowd mentality was there. Back then, he was something that we were in awe of. The crowd that's there, doesn't matter if he's dead or dying or what. They're still in awe of him. So yeah, they're gonna.
Yeah, but not only are they in awe of him, they're in awe of the people who stopped him.
Yes.
Yeah, I get that.
That works both ways.
Let's go back to the point you were trying to make a few minutes ago with the human element.
Sure.
You've got the picture of Godzilla in the back. You've got all these people down here. What would it have hurt? Because every Godzilla film, they call for tons of extras. People come from the droves to do Godzilla films.
Sure.
What would it have cost them to sit there and took a small group of 5 or 6 people and just kind of like you know, and just
make them
show the people? But in some of these people have the bandages, so that way you would see the devastation.
Well, sure.
Have bandages,
see
look
the pain.
injured and untreated, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't have been
do any of
hard.
that.
There would have been.
That's my point.
The humanity that you were looking for
is how hard is it? Why wasn't it there? That's my point.
So let me ask this, because I want to kick back actually very early in the movie. We brought it up a couple of times. The movie, there are a lot of night shots. They do a very good job of illustrating, because what you have not seen and what the rest of you haven't seen between the 54 version and this one is there is a point in time where Godzilla goes from being the legitimate threat that must be stopped in Godzilla and in Godzilla Raids Again to being, for a few movies, he is the adversary, not so much the force of nature that you got to stop any way you can, but he becomes the adversary for heroes to where he becomes briefly the anti-hero and then full on he is the hero. And it very much becomes a children's matinee type thing. We see Godzilla doing victory end zone dances in some of these movies, and doing drop kicks.
Did he get a kid in one of them?
Yeah, he has twice.
Mila.
In two different times he gets
Son
kids.
of Godzilla and Revenge of Godzilla.
Well, no, he has a kid in the Heisei era too, and then he gets a kid, and he gets a kid in the Millennium series at one point. So yeah, they do that often. But through all of that, he even had multiple kids in the TriStar version.
Are you saying they jumped a giant thunder lizard?
Yes, they did. But when they go from the 54 movie to this one, they are restoring Godzilla to this dark force of nature, this creature to be feared, where he truly is a monster, not a gigantic hero.
Yeah, the single entity.
The atmosphere behind that, the shots they choose to take, and so on, I think they do a pretty good job in this one. Frankly, not as good as the original, but I think that sense of dread and atmosphere and ambiance all gets set up on the ship at the beginning of the movie. And I think there, when we have the guy creeping through the purple haze of this ship, as y'all put it.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that wasn't even Godzilla that did that. It was his fleas.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, after watching the Cloverfield fiasco, there are parts of it I really like. There are parts of it I don't. But the little monsters that are running through the subway, I know story-wise they're kind of stupid. It's like, these things are trying to eat you. Why does it take 20 minutes for them to decide to attack you? Shit like that. You can argue about it. But they're creepy.
Right.
Yes.
They're creepy little spider mites. And this sea louse slug thing, I don't even know what the hell a sea louse is. All I knew was a giant green parasite thing that it's with pinchers going for his eyeball. And
You're really close when you say sea flea.
It was horrid. It was to me the creepiest part. Godzilla looked angry at times. Godzilla's definitely dangerous all the time. But there are also times where he looks goofy. There are times where
It looks high.
he looks
Yeah,
high.
he was stoned.
There's times where he had to take a nap time. And I'm not opposed to all of that. It does make him more rounded. And if he's going to be a character and not an event. See, the Godzilla first one, he's an event.
Yeah.
I
think that's a fair statement.
In the second one, he's kind of a character. Because he's been a character apparently in between these 30 years.
Yeah, and in 15 subsequent, or
Right,
14
right.
films in between, he's developed some.
I mean, my favorite part of the Godzilla suit is every time he roars.
Yeah.
That mouth, that moment, it looks like he could eat whatever the hell he wants.
Yeah.
His little arms sometimes don't look all that powerful. His giant...
Well, that's just the guy in the suit
Right.
moving with the inability to move, but
His giant feet, those look, that look
Powerful enough to crush.
Exactly.
and the tail,
And
too.
the tail, exactly.
Oh, the tail was
But that
amazing.
diving motion,
Yeah.
when he dived, that was just a dude falling over into the water. It was so bad. It had just been better if he'd have just went, dude, and sunk straight down. Be all like, I got my eye on you. I'm gonna be back. That'd have creeped you out.
And
They kind of recovered a little bit with the swimming with the tail action of apparently he decided to swim further
Sure.
up into the bay. But
But
you're right, the falls.
I'll be honest with you, that giant plastic thing you brought for your photo,
Yeah.
you could do the exact same scene with that.
Oh, yeah, you talking about the giant Godzilla one that I
Right.
bought? Yeah.
You could just be all like, bathtub splash.
That's it.
Do-do-do-do-do.
there's, and I know you had mentioned that you found the atomic breath in this very hit or miss.
Yeah, when he's using it against the land-based things,
It works.
It looks good. When he's using it against air, I think what it is when the camera is kind of side by side and you see it from that side, it looks good. When I'm looking at Godzilla and he's breathing it at me, it looks like somebody went
Kind of
color.
like, kind of
Color
like
it
an
in.
angle.
The spin on the helicopter worked. Everything else, not really.
And you notice how it was curved?
no, I didn't.
I
How
Like
it came out
curves
looked
in
like
places.
curves a little bit
I'll believe you.
instead of the straight out like
Yeah.
it should have been.
Now, I know when we watched the first one, there wasn't a beam. We just saw kind of like, it's a heat effect and things were melting.
Well, and we saw a fine mist. They used the effect as basically a fire extinguisher for all intent and
Okay.
purpose, loaded in the mouth as the effect
And
of
I remember
the
we
beam.
talked about how that melting effect, and you
Right.
had made a statement about how they don't really do that.
Mm-mm.
Well, in this one, they kind of did. I mean, they shot the beam, and afterwards, everything looked melted.
Right, but
when it was
then-
the stuff on the land.
It worked
But
a lot
the-
faster. It was
Well, I mean,
sped up.
it was still pretty good.
Right, but the initial, my difference between the two is the initial in this one is an explosion, and then you see the melting. And
Well,
what
sometimes there's an explosion, sometimes there's the bright flash or whatever's
Right.
going on, and then the melted remains.
what I liked about the original one in comparison, and what I thought was for the 1954 feature incredibly ingenious, is that you actually see the radiation melting this stuff.
As what we would think would happen
What
if
we
you
think
would
would happen.
if you were to put this in a microwave.
What would
this-
happen?
Yeah.
Now, granted, I think we all agree the costume was league steps and beyond what we saw in the original.
Mm-hmm. No, I disagree. I think the original one was better.
Is it the original one was a better costume,
or
the shot, the way it was shot was
presented?
better?
I don't know, but if it was the way it was presented, then it was the way it was presented.
Because I think
the claymation was way creepier than any of the puppetry or whatever they did in this one.
Because I think if you actually just put the two physical suits side by side, you would say it the other way. I think presentation, plays a lot into it.
Well, that's actually
that's all I can read
was
on.
Ask about. In the first one, you don't see them often. When you do, it's pretty big. I know we were going to... Yeah, there is no question that you have to see them more often because of what they can do with the physical effects. Do you think they gave you too much?
In this film?
Yes.
Did they give you too much of Godzilla early or too much Godzilla period?
When Godzilla popped over the mountain in that first movie, I looked at you and went, that's creepy.
Yes.
That's unnerving.
Yes.
Okay? Some of his facial expressions, again, it was the claymation or Rankin and Bass kind of whatever style of animation it is, it was unnerving. Whether it was unnerving because it doesn't look natural or it's unnerving for other reasons, I don't care. It was unnerving. This one, Godzilla never unnerved me. His actions did, but what he looked like didn't.
Okay.
I think, truthfully, from a spectacle standpoint, the movie in Japan, they didn't call this The Return of Godzilla. It was simply Godzilla.
Right.
The Return of was kind of added later on to distinguish it. I think, given the previous 15 films, you had to see this much, because if you didn't, it would probably be considered a letdown, because you saw more of him in the previous 14 than you did in this one. But into my mindset, from a purely storytelling standpoint, he's the monster. He's what you fear. If you see him too much, he's commonplace.
Hinging on that, given their design directive of screw everything intervening, going back to the original, I don't think I wouldn't give that argument of you've seen so much of him in the past couple films to really hold much weight in water, given what their intent was. I agree. I think you saw a bit too much of him from the story standpoint.
No matter what
from a
your
couple
intent
extra
is.
shots, you could have done slightly differently. Maybe seen part of him behind a building. Or
the most
all that.
effective shots of him. The single most effective shot of Godzilla in the movie was his reflection in the skyscraper to me.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was the most effective shot you got of Godzilla in the film, because you got the sense of scale. You see this skyscraper. You can buy that it's a skyscraper.
Some of his roars.
And you can see his reflection in it. That, to me, is the most effective shot of Godzilla in the movie. When you see something of that size, I think if you can see the whole thing on screen at the same time, it diminishes the scope and scale. It was something that I never thought about. I always realized...
when he's walking towards you and it's like, Godzilla, your thighs are so fat, you need to have a...
But something I never thought about consciously. It had always triggered in my head that if I can see the whole thing in frame, it looks smaller. That process always worked in my head, but I never knew why. And I was watching the J.J. Abrams Star Trek with the commentary on, and the first time you see the Enterprise, it's chopped off. You don't see the entire nacelles. You don't see the entire saucer. Mm-hmm. But you see the bulk of it, but not all of it. And it was a conscious design decision for the shot. The Enterprise is so big, the screen can't actually hold it all.
It depends on what you're trying to accomplish.
Right.
When he's snarling, I thought that looks dumb. But when you saw his whole head and he roared, that looked scary.
Yeah. See, I was the other way around.
Well... When he snarled, I was like, Godzilla's doing...
his snarling?
I was actually okay with them giving him some facial expression and actually getting to see that, because it didn't... Yes, it's animatronic, but it didn't look like something he couldn't do.
And it was a step up from the previous films that
whereas
came before it.
The stuff they did with his eyes is in the same...
His eyes look very good.
It's in the same genre what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And while you can tell... the fakeness of it, I agree. The expressions in his eyes sell. The snarl didn't do anything for me. It's when he opened his mouth and you realize he can eat any effing thing in the city he wants.
Those teeth are
huge. It's a subway tunnel for a gullet. There is nothing can stop him.
Right.
Hey, the submarine, they deliver. Hey, helicopters, they deliver. Hey, bullet trains, they deliver. I kept waiting for him to just eat
Smorgasbord.
everything. Yeah.
But
But him doing bad Elvis impersonations with his lip just didn't do it for me.
to your point, though, I think you saw. I don't know that you saw too much of the monster as far as how many times he shows up. I think
You see too much of him on the
you
screen.
see
at
too
one
much
time.
of him on the screen at the one time. It would have behooved them to obscure him more.
I
They
agree.
could have
see
kept
him
him
in
a little
shadow.
bit lower
Yeah.
in the water when he's in the bay. I think if they had done it so that instead of just standing here and taking it to the mouth by the Super X, if he had been coming around, just
Trying to
coming
get to
around a building or trying to get to it because it's got mobility, play that up. And then the first time you get that full body shot all at once in the screen is when he's slumped over, so he is, because he's supposed to look diminished, and reinforce it by finally having it full in.
I agree
that
with
could
you.
have been a more
Yeah.
powerful
In
piece.
that moment where he is supposed to be weakened, that's when he should look small.
Yes.
The full size shots of him should either be, like you say, when he looks small, or it should be the paycheck. It should be, this is when you realize just how big he is, just how dangerous he is.
But just how much
When
the
he-
city is now
when
been
he-
reduced.
When he pushed the building over, that's when they should have showed him. You know what I mean?
Well, but you stop and think about it. You see him. It is a full screen shot of Godzilla when you see him walking down the street, but he's obscured. Here's part of a building here. Here's the subway. Here's the bullet train coming through. Here's the. You're not
see his
seeing
full
all of
height.
Godzilla, but you see his full
Sure,
size.
when he's wrecking the telephone wires,
As
they're
a-
going across his shin and you can see his thigh. That's all
As-
you need to see.
This is a terrible example, really, but
I
one
kept
of the
waiting
most
for him to fall down.
one of the most effective shots you could do in something like this is from from Power Rangers. There's an iconic shot of the Dragon Zord. When you see it walking into town, all you see is basically from just under the mouth up, and you see it above the tops of the skyscrapers
Sure.
as it's
Yeah, you
walking
see the
through.
slight
You just see the silhouette of the
wave
head,
of the-
and if you
of the motion.
see just here's
The profile
Godzilla,
of the
here's the
head.
profile of Godzilla from here, like from jawline up, walking across, and you see him over the building.
I'm not disagreeing with
that
you.
kind of stuff.
I'm not disagreeing with you at all.
But that's where I think it would have behooved them to do that more. In later movies, they still don't do it, but in later movies, you don't
it's
want them to
different.
because it's a different kind of movie.
Well, I was just about to say, we don't know if this was just the way it was done in the 80s. I mean,
Again,
It's
I
like-
hinged
it's-
my question off of, given their design directive of going back to the original, where
Yeah.
less was more.
Yeah. But
And
that's
show
going back.
don't
That's going
tell.
back to what you and I, what I was saying earlier that you and I were kind of talking about. It was almost like with Godzilla in 1985, 84. It was like they were sitting back there taking notes because once you get past this movie, it's Godzilla versus Biollante, and it's the starting of the 90s. The creature itself, Godzilla himself, is totally different in his design. I mean, this is the era where Godzilla, where they always kind of, jokingly called him the cat face Godzilla because his face is more feline, but it's more animalistic. It's more fearful.
this one or the ones that come after?
Come after.
Some of the
Okay.
design tweaks going forward.
Yeah.
So
He gets this more feral air, he gets this more expressive air at the same time.
And then by the time the millennium comes, after everyone have seen Godzilla TriStar version, then you really get the feral Godzilla with his spines are just extremed out to here and
Looks like Rob
jagged
Liefeld
rocks.
Rob
He looks
Liefeld
like-
designed him.
Yeah.
And to be fair, you also start getting past that.
He's not
Is there a
upright.
Yeah,
he's
he is
he's
more,
the guy
I
in
am
the
a
suit
predator,
said, I'm going
going
to do
to
it
get
like this.
right.
So, some closing thoughts on the return of Godzilla, what we thought, likes, dislikes, and the next Godzilla movie we watch on the show is either going to be, because one of the things we talked about very early on was watching the first Godzilla movie of every era. So the next one in order should actually be the TriStar Godzilla, but we may skip it and go straight to Godzilla 2000. But it'll be one of those two next. So, closing thoughts on this one, likes, dislikes, and what you might be looking forward to, what you think your tastes might be in some giant monster movies going forward, because they're not all going to be Godzilla. Dave?
I like the first movie better, so I'm just going to start with that. This one was okay. There are aspects of it that, like I said when we were watching it, I can see why a fan such as Ryan likes this. It is action. It is... Turn your brain off from 2015 and put yourself back in 1985 and being 7 or 12 and watching this sumbitch on the couch. Man, that thing must have been awesome. Yeah. Because there was a lot of cool to it. There were a lot of nitpicky crap I just couldn't deal with. Man, them at the end crying because Godzilla fell down the volcano. I was so... Maybe I'm a dick, but that was so dumb.
You're sure.
That was so dumb.
Part of that's just cultural expression allowances, because he could have just as easily been crying in joy and going in relief.
Well, I didn't see the tears, but you guys all said they were, so I'm going to go with it.
It was there. I mean...
This worked. Holy shit. Relief.
Cry at the death of Spock, but, I'm a Godzilla.
Right.
I did not cry when he fell into the volcano.
Right. What I'm looking forward to is, quite frankly, I hope the next one is absolutely 100% different as well. Because it almost feels that way between 1954 to 1984. It almost feels like a completely different genre. And from 1984 to, 2000?
2000, yep.
That's 16 years, not quite as many.
Specifically, it came out in 99. They called it Godzilla 2000.
Sure.
So.
I mean, I'm hoping it's different.
I enjoyed the movie. Like I said, I really don't have much experience with the giant monsters.
Mm-hmm.
Be honest, I've seen bits and pieces of King Kong kind of thing, but other than that, yeah. I like what I saw.
Mm-hmm.
I do kind of, was waiting on him to start eating stuff,
Right.
But, and I'm thinking, okay, giant lizard, you gotta be hungry after a long walk.
I think we played too much Rampage.
that might be it too. Were you eating anything and
everything? It's bad for you. Who cares? Nom.
Even the other players when they get
That's right.
Found out. Yep. And really, I don't really have much experience with it. It's like I'm really not sure what anything else to expect from the genre itself.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm pretty right now pretty open-minded.
Okay.
So,
Joseph.
I'm going to keep it short since Ryan's probably going to echo a lot of what I'd want to say anyway, since we both have seen the American version. I like this version a lot more overall.
Mm-hmm.
I personally like, since it's been quite a few years to be fair, since I saw the American version, I like being able to come back to it and be harsh and critical of it. It is actually a remarkably different viewing experience when you're going in intent to analyze the film, because, like Dave pointed out, these are films when I originally watched what I've watched among the kaiju area of film. Turn your brain off, enjoy the spectacle,
right?
And you can still get the emotional moments from 54 just as much as from here, but it's a different and I think more fulfilling manner of experience to try and analyze it when you know you can do it with friends.
Yeah.
Doing it on your own, probably boring as hell, let's be fair. But I'll leave Ryan to take it away from here.
Go for it, sir.
Yeah, I'll say this right quick. I agree. There's nothing wrong with Godzilla 1984 or 85. I like the 84 version.
It's a side-by-side thing.
Yeah, it's the same thing as Godzilla King of the Monsters versus Gojira. It's the same film. It takes you in two different directions, being one Japanese, the other one being the American version for it. As a kid watching it on the big screen, yeah, I mean Dave's right. He hits it right straight. Yeah, I was stoked. I mean, you were sitting down there, you got your popcorn, and then here comes the music. Now, it's not the original music that most all Godzilla films start with, right. But it does have its place for this film.
Right.
Not in every aspect, but what you're seeing is the rebirth at this point of a Godzilla film that was being premiered in an American theater,
right,
at that time frame. The don'ts that I don't like about the film, it's just hit and miss little things. It's nothing really critical. It's like all Godzilla films. Let me rephrase that. It's like all kaiju films, whether it be Godzilla, Rodan, War of the Gargantuans, anything. you know, it's just a film for you to sit down, unplug from the way we are living in this world today. Get your kids, set them down, cut up, create your own Mystery Theater, for crying out loud. If you can't do anything else better than that, Mystery 3000.
Yeah, that's what I said. This is why it's better with friends, because when you go in and do that,
Yeah.
you have somebody else you can talk to about it and cut up.
Yeah.
It makes it a different experience entirely.
I mean, it's not a film that you shouldn't sit down and watch. It's a film that's hard to get your hands on. I mean, I'm waiting for TriStar to get off their butt or Sony to put this out.
By the way, on that note, if you ever see a local organization or whatnot do a drive-in theater or anything like that, you can find one of these old films that, as we're watching them, and get this big screen experience. They are the best thing ever.
Oh.
I really love that tradition, and thank God, because that's how I saw this, was at a drive-in that somebody had just...
When I saw the legendary
a digital
Godzilla
copy.
for the first time, it was at a drive-in theater. I saw the 2014 legendary Godzilla on the big screen at a drive-in, and it was incredible.
I was planning to talk to you after the show about the watching something in a theater. I mean, I had seen Star Wars, but I never saw Star Wars in the theater because it came out in 1977, and so did I.
I did. I saw Return.
But when I saw the remastered versions in the theater,
Yeah.
I mean, I was just
Blown
It's
away.
flattened.
You and me would be sitting side by side. I saw it when it came out in the movie theater. My mother took me along with two friends from the neighborhood. If you and I had sat down and watched it, this had been your first time in the movie theater, you wouldn't have. It would have been totally the same experience.
She's like, everybody can talk trash about Transformers they want now, but I guarantee the first time Optimus Prime transformed in that movie,
You shitting.
That's right.
You're shitting yourself. Right
they were
then and
like,
there, because you're
robot
like,
porn.
I had that toy. I love that toy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he transforms different, but it's still awesome.
Yeah. Going forward, what I would like to see everyone here. We've only touched a little bit of the Godzilla, but there is so much more. You've got Ultraman.
God, yes.
You've got Gamera. You do have Rodan. There's only like one or two films there. Mothra. There's a nice little swat of films there from Mothra. I personally would like to see the first non-Godzilla kaiju film be War of the Gargantuans.
I'd be okay with that.
I've never
what I've
seen
been
You
wanting
guys
to see.
really need to see Gara and Sanda. That
Before
is
Mike
a
gives his opinion,
phenomenal film.
I kind of like the way we're doing it. Not because I think it's great, but because, and it's going to sound funny, and I hope it don't sound like I'm kissing ass, but it's your vision. It's Mike's vision of presentation. When you watched him coming out in the theater, you watched him one by one by one by one. That's how you had to eat them.
Yeah.
He's like, all right, I've seen a handful of these. I'm going to take these ingredients and present them in a different way.
Yeah.
And we can agree or disagree to like them that way, but I think it's neat to see it this presentation and to digest it that way.
In my head, the thing about Godzilla, first I'll touch on this movie, and then I guess I'll answer to your comments. My thought process on the film, the story, I enjoyed a lot. I love it when a franchise, a long-lived franchise, is willing to play into its own history. There, you run the risk of getting so self-referential and so steeped in continuity that no one can understand it. But when you do it right, it's magical, because someone can come in and see this for the very first time. This was Richie's first Godzilla movie ever. And I would dare say you were not lost.
Yeah, you're right. You can't watch Star Trek 3.
Yeah, you can't jump in and watch Star Trek 3 and not be lost at some point if you have no frame of reference for Star Trek. Whereas for the people who have seen other Godzilla movies, I've seen a handful. I haven't seen all the classic ones, but I've seen basically everything from this one forward plus the first three. So I'm missing a swath of about 10 or 11 films I haven't seen. And I catch the little winks and nods. I catch some of them. And then and so I can catch those and appreciate them. And then there's people like you who I saw the look on your face, and it was the look of a child unwrapping a present on Christmas morning, because here's the one Godzilla movie you've never actually seen in its original form, and today you did. But here's the person who's seen them all, and it's like, I catch I'm seeing everything in this film the way it was originally meant to be seen. So you can catch all of that. So when it works, it's great. When it doesn't work, it's terrible. This one, it works. So I enjoyed that. if I were to knock the film for anything, Godzilla is known for having some amazing soundtracks. This wasn't one of them. And one of the things the Godzilla movies have always been very good about is accentuate your strengths and hide your weaknesses. The 54 movie with Eiji Tsuburaya at the helm of the effects department did that amazingly well. This movie, the credit I will give it is they dared to try some things that had never been done in a Godzilla movie before. They dared to push the effects as far as they could push them. I think there were points they pushed them too far. Because there are some moments in the film where the effects just bounce me right out. So that would be my knock, is there are some effects in this movie that just don't work for me. Overall, though, I think it is a very... With the intent being, this is... it dawns on me that using Superman Returns to Superman as a point of reference is actually an incredibly good analogy, because Superman, the Superman movie franchise of Chris Reeves, splinters. You have Superman, Superman 2, and then the actual franchise goes 3, 4, but Superman Returns is the alternative sequel to 2.
Yep.
Is it?
Yes, it actually takes 3 and 4 and dismisses them completely.
Didn't know that.
Yeah.
And it's the alternative sequel.
And to be honest with you, that's exactly how you need to see it.
Well, see, I like
Leave
3 and 4.
4 and take it to the side.
But
I like 3 and 4, but I like them for what they are: a comedy film and a patriotic film.
But this film is very likewise. You have Godzilla raids again, King Kong versus Godzilla, and the 10 films that come out, or 12 or 13, 14 films, ever how many is, come after them. And then you have this one, which is the alternative sequel. Here's the first one, and you either watch Raids Again or you watch The Return of Godzilla. And as essentially the alternative sequel to the original, I think it's a worthy successor to the original film.
Because they tried this again.
Yeah, they
back
did.
with Godzilla, and that's what you and I were talking about.
They
back
tried a
with
couple times.
Godzilla, Mothra, Ghidorah.
Oh, they do it. Every film in the Millennium series does this, but this one does it very well.
There.
Now, to speak to the presentation aspect, Godzilla does not have the Whitman sampler box of its franchise, and what I mean by that is,
I like that analogy.
well, I use that.
Now we want
analogy-
candy.
Making right.
I use that analogy for a couple of things. A lot of people who've never seen anything from Kamen Rider, I will usually suggest watching Kamen Rider Decade. Because Kamen Rider Decade features the first 9 Heisei-era Kamen Riders. In that show, he travels to their different worlds, he encounters them, he meets them and works with them, and he even meets some of the old-school Showa riders, but it's not mired in continuity, because the worlds he's going to are alternate universes. Okay. So they are... You catch the flavor, the essence, the style of that series without having to be bogged down by that series' continuity. And so you can watch it and go, ooh, I think Ryuki looks really cool. I want to go watch his show and see what it's all about.
It's kind of like checking out a graphic novel. I'm interested in this comic book character. Which story would you... Man, if you like Batman, check out The Killing Joke.
Sort of, yeah.
If you're interested in it, then you can look into the 75-year history of the character.
Yeah. Then you have, if it's Super Sentai, you have Gokaiger, which is the 35th anniversary of Super Sentai, and they touch on all 35 years. And again, you don't have to be... But the thing is
it's a buffet, though. I mean, it's a little daunting.
But you don't have to be mired in the continuity.
Sure.
There's winks and nods, but you don't have to know the backgrounds of all these other teams. You will see the flavors, the essences of them, and it serves as kind of a sampler box. So that's a good jumping on point if you're a Super Sentai fan. There is no such thing for Godzilla.
That's just what you're trying to make,
yeah,
really, for our audiences.
The closest thing you get is Final Wars, which only does so much if you want to simply look at the monsters and see the designs, and that's it.
Don't forget Godzilla Destroy All Monsters, which is basically where
the
Final War is just a basic revision of that
in a lot of ways.
Old film.
Oh, absolutely. So what I'm doing with this is there are 3 very distinctive eras of Godzilla. So here's where each era starts. This is the foundation of each one. And watch them in order, because you'll see where they're built upon the foundation that came before.
Well, I get what you're doing, because like if Ryan said, man, I'm interested in this Star Trek The Next Generation, where should I go? I wouldn't have him start at episode 1. I would be like, let's watch the Best of Both Worlds mini, two-parter. That's a good example of what you're going to get. Then I'd go looking for something with some comedy. Like my friend Charles. I found some stuff with Klingons because he likes Klingons. And showing him some Klingon stories in Deep Space Nine and Next Generation made him more interested in the wider scope of the newer stuff than it's not the original series, I don't give a F. So, I get where you're going with that.
So, but that's what I'm trying to do, but that's my opinion, way to look at it. But we will be, one of the things that you had brought up on an earlier show was, after we turned the mics off, you like having let's watch a TV show then a movie. We'll probably be doing that a little more often. As we catch up on the TV shows we're watching. You'll probably see more of that.
Catch up, you mean?
I don't know about vainly attempt, but we're going to give it a shot.
Marathoning Drive, and even though we're going to get caught up a bit more on Drive because of that, we're going to be behind on other series that
don't worry, we'll be marathoning the Ninja too.
Oh, boy.
I think the thing
You're
that I
going to be
like
on
about
your
it
own with Richie for that.
is it brings a variety.
Right.
And even the movies are going to be varieties.
Feed the troll.
We could easily jump genres if we wanted to about movies.
Oh, sure. So, folks, I think this probably brings this episode of Denzicaster to a close. I've got some editing ahead of me because the counter clock says 3 hours and 6 minutes.
Let it ride.
So until then, folks, I am Mike.
I'm Dave.
Richie.
I'm Roger.
Joe.
And I'm Ryan.
And we will see you next time on Denzicaster. Thank you for listening to this episode from the Denzicaster Archives. All music heard in this episode composed by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. We want to hear from you, so like us on Facebook, facebook.com/Denzicaster, and follow us on Twitter @ECS Podcasts. And of course, share, like, subscribe.